Hello and welcome to Academy Standouts for Week 3 of the 2021 Summer Split. So we are looking at the North American Academy League, looking at the teams that played in Week 3 and which players shone the brightest. We'll go into a little bit of detail about the top 3 that stood out to me the most, and then also some kind of honorable mentions, people who caught my eye but not quite to the same level. So let's jump into it. Let's look at the first player I want to highlight from Week 3, and that's Ryoma from 100 Thieves Academy. So when we look at what he did, He's a player who in the past has, I've had the impression of him that a area of weakness for him was kind of his moves outside of his lane, his recognition of emerging action in the river, his ability to kind of affect side lanes and things like that. And the main way that he shone this week was by doing those things really well. He played really hard into the side lanes, especially on Lee Sin. Had some huge, very active roams. He was playing like Demonte out there. Maybe he picked something up from him. And then he also played a Tristana and a Syndra, 2 games of Lee Sin. The Syndra has a counter to Lucian in lane, which is kind of one of the classic counters we've seen. So he showed a lot of flexibility. He showed a lot of really good map activity that I appreciated a lot, especially given kind of his history as a player. Had a huge week, 7.3 KDA for the week. Was up in lane. Sometimes when you do that roaming, it can do more for your teammates than it does for you, but he still went up in lane overall. Big damage output. So impressive week from him. Definitely glad to highlight him. Iles was the next from Cloud9 Academy, one of the Oceanic players who came over for this year. And I think throughout spring, it was really between Iles and Ayla as kind of the best supports, I would say, in Academy. And right now, Iles is starting to pull away and say, like, stake a claim like he is the strongest support in Academy right now. He played Thresh, Alistar, he played Nautilus twice, made really good plays in lane. He and Zven were really lane dominant. He also made a lot of engages, landed good Nautilus hooks to set up fights and things. 11.8 KDI in the week, that's really high. Low deaths, despite doing all that playmaking. Really strong week from Iles. And the partner to that was Zven. So together with 2 of them, I think obviously Zven is just a better player than you're going to see in Academy normally, right? Like, it's unusual circumstances that have him playing down here at all. And so it's not, surprising, or shouldn't be surprising, to see him performing really well. But I'd say, this was the best week he's had in Academy so far. It was the most visibly dominant. He just destroyed people in lane, more than 800. More than plus 800 and gold plus experience difference of 10 minutes, a 22 KDA, good damage, tons of farm, all the things that you would look for from a player who's just better than the competition around him. And, if he maintains this level going forward, I probably won't talk about him as much. I'll have him in the list, but I'm not going to highlight him as much. But I did want to recognize this is the first week of the season so far that I've put him in the top 3, I'm pretty sure. And he's just been getting better and better every week, I think, as he and Iles come together as a duo. And it's not that he wasn't playing as well before, but just the amount of visible dominance we saw was really there. So, I think Cloud9 with their LCS team struggling as hard as it is, I don't know if you would look at the direct kind of bot lane skill-to-skill comparison and say that's why C9 are failing at the LCS level. I think there's a huge conversation to be had there. And all over the team, they're having problems. Perk's not playing well, Fudge misplaying a lot of situations and not using his lane right or being synchronized, different things going on. But when you look at how well Zven is playing and the fact that C9 are struggling at the start of summer, given the roster change they made, there's going to be a lot of internal pressure saying like, hey, we got to right the ship. And Zven is doing everything he can to prove that he should be the better choice in LCS. So we'll see what happens there. On the additional standouts level, I have a bunch of players here. So another Cloud9 Academy player, a couple of them that I wanted to highlight. Copy, I think he played Set a lot. He played Set, I think, 3 times, and then Syndra once. I think that's what it was. And obviously Set can get pushed around in lane. He was playing against stuff like Lucian from Jojo Pion and went way down in lane, more than I think you'd expect, even given the matchup. But he showed a lot of resilience, great team fighting, lots of engages and approaching things from the right angles. So, I think I'd like to see him continue to be more of an active carry and a damage source and round out that area of his game. But he's really good at that utility play, that those kinds of champions that are okay to lose lane and then still take over in other ways. So I was impressed with him. Darshan as well. Obviously, I think even if he didn't have a good week overall, if you look at the 1v5 pentakill, and you can look it up, where he literally like one or two at a time had the other team come into him and he killed them all. Like I think it was actual 5 solo kills of a pentakill, and that was just amazing. So that on its own puts him on the list, but he did have a really good week overall of Lee Sin. I think he played it all 4 games and nobody banned against him or picked it away, so I don't really know what's going on there. Hanser, some more veterans on this list, and they're not all veterans on this list, but Hanser also had a good week. I think in spring he often kind of crushed the opposition in lane and was just a better laner than most of what he came up against, but then he'd do some kind of really silly stuff later, try to force plays, or like it kind of felt like ego plays sometimes, like I'm going to push this lane, there's nothing you can do about it, and the other team's like, well, our champions, even if we're not as good at pressing the buttons do the same thing, and you're still going to die, even if you're better than us. So, he gave up some bad plays and deaths like that in spring, but he's kind of reversing that story in summer so far. Not to say he's laning poorly, but he's been making some really good mid and late game plays, keeping his team in it and leading comebacks and things like that, team fighting a lot better. So I wanted to recognize him for that. Kumo. And this is a player who I've had a lot of criticism to put on in the past. But this was, we did see some really high points from Kumo earlier in his career. He got that chance on C9, seemed to be playing pretty well and running with it, and then had his LCS shot and gradually fell off and lost his spot. But the way he played in week 3 was the high point of Kumo. He was back to that level. Really, really good stuff. And if he can maintain that over, relatively consistently over the rest of the academy split, he's going to be a player that we have to get back to watching more closely again. Luger, I mean, what do you say about Luger? He's, he's probably the closest bot laner we have to Zven's level in academy. I don't know that I'd put him on Zven's level right now, but it's honestly like there's a conversation worth having. He's just really good and he played really well. Prismal, an interesting one. He played 3 games of Ziggs in the bot lane, and he only won once, but his actual level of play in those games was really high. He used the Ziggs really well, seemed very comfortable with it, would clean up kills at the end of fights that would either salvage a lost team fight or kind of create something, use the satchel charges creatively, generate all the macro pressure and wave clear pressure that you expect from a Ziggs. And he also played a Kalista that, again, like it was a loss, but he did so many things so well and made it really close to winning team fights that they had no business winning. So he played really, really well, even though the team as a whole was struggling. And then finally, Takeover. And here, this is a really interesting one because TSM Academy have been playing with Sword. They played with Sword in mid lane all through spring. They signed Takeover to join for summer. It took him a couple of weeks of not being available to play, but now he finally was in week 3. And he came in with a bang. He played a whole bunch of melee champions, Yone, Silas, Akali, and Set. And, was pretty impressive overall. Not quite enough to put him in the top 3 for me, but if he maintains that level, he's definitely going to challenge for one of the better mid laners in Academy. And so far, the first impression has been very strong. So I'm excited about this, and I think TSM have something to watch here for sure. So that's Academy Standouts, week 3 of the summer split. And stay tuned for an update next week on week 4.